Welcome, listeners, to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My friend Laura Root, who's been a mentor to me for about all the time I've been an ally. I met her a long time ago, and now she has a wonderful wife and building a wonderful life together in Idaho. And I've stayed friends with Laura. She continues sometimes to reach out to me and it helps me to know how to do better, and also is grateful at times for the work I'm doing. So she's just been a terrific mentor to me to understand this space. And she sent me a message and said, "Hey, I've got a podcast guest for you. Her name is Jeanette Griggs. You ought to reach out to Jeanette Griggs and get her on the podcast." So here we are. Jeanette Griggs is on the podcast. Welcome to the podcast, Jeanette.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
Jeanette I'll tell you a little bit about Jeanette as we've been visiting. She's 47 years old. She is engaged to her girlfriend, future wife, Lindsay. Lindsay has 2 kids, I believe, from a prior marriage. And so they are together raising these 2 kids in Boise, Idaho. She has a career in education, 20 plus years, and now works at a high school helping teachers better teach. And that makes me happy to know you're taking all this years of education, your academic work, your educational training, and are providing mentoring to other teachers. And thank you for all you've done in our education world in so many ways. She also has written a book. We're going to link to her book at Amazon in the show notes. And I've spent an hour this morning skimming it as fast as I could to get prepared for the podcast. I wish I had a power read skill. I could just read a 255-page book. But the name of the book is Be True. From Orthodoxy to Authenticity, The Journey Wasn't Straight, by Jeanette M. Griggs. And as I've been reading this, I've just been reading her story growing up, I believe, in Idaho, with no proximity to LGBTQ people, no vocabulary, no anything, except she's not straight. She's not really comfortable as identifying as gay or lesbian. Those are kind of negative labels in society, but that's who she is. And she's obviously comfortable with her sexual orientation. But this has been a journey to just sort of understand this and process feelings at times for women and gradually then fully accept her sexual orientation, her best path forward. So we said a prayer before we started that, if you're early in your journey trying to figure out your sexual orientation, that perhaps Jeanette's story will help you. And I think it's really good when people own their sexual orientation. I think it's more clear their best path forward and more clear how God feels about them. And for the rest of us, allies and parents, and trying to people understand, I just hope what Jeanette shares with us will be helpful. Every story is different. We've done, almost 1,000 of these stories, and every time I learn something new. So I will turn it over to Jeanette to share her story, and so grateful you're here.
Well, thank you. It's nice to officially meet you and to be part of your podcast. Your Listen, Learn, and Love was one of the first podcasts that I listened to when I was entering this space and trying to figure things out. And I've just appreciated the vastness of your guests and their different stories and how it's done exactly what I think you intended it to do, which is help me to see other people's perspectives and help me to understand them better. And so I never thought I'd be one of your guests, but it's exciting to be here. So,
And here
yeah,
you are.
and here I am. I'm going to give you an overview of my story that is in my book that it goes a little bit more in depth and then just maybe a few takeaways at the end. And so, yeah, hopefully it's meaningful for you and for others. So, my ancestors were Mormon pioneers, like a lot of us. And I think it was about 5 generations back. Missionaries in England found my grandmother, Charlotte, and I picture her like me. I think she probably had hazel eyes and brown hair, and she was recently widowed in her 30s. And so had one son left at home, and the message of the gospel, certainly something about it resonated with her, probably eternal families. So she was baptized along with her 10-year-old son, Thomas Cott. They called him TC. And then they got on the Wellfleet, this ship, and sailed to America, and then joined up with the Joseph Horn Pioneer Company and traveled across the plains to settle in Zion in Salt Lake in Utah. And so TC, her son, kept prolific journals. They're now in the BYU Special Collections Library, and he wrote his whole life. And he became pretty high ranking in the church. He served as the Sunday school general president for a while. He directed the Tabernacle Choir for a time. He actually wrote the song "Gently Raise the Sacred Strain," which opens for music and the spoken word to this day. So he, yeah, we're pretty proud of our pioneer heritage and of TC and of everyone who set the stage for our family. He had multiple wives, and his first wife was Jeanette, and so that was my namesake, along with a daughter he named Jeanette. So it's just been a family name throughout time. And I grew up in Sugar City, Idaho, which is a suburb of Ricks College, or BYU Idaho, of Rexburg. And my parents met there back when it was Ricks College. They were family home evening brother and sister. And then they decided they wanted to make their family eternal. So when I was born, they were at BYU Provo and they were young. My dad was actually trying to finish a final and he was distracted because his wife was having their first child. And so he had to petition to like redo the class. So he always remembers just how stressful it was to be so young. But they, yeah, they thought I was so cute. They would travel from Provo back to Idaho and they would honk at cars they passed on the road and hold me up like, look at this cute kid we created. And they just thought I was so cute. And so they still to this day think this Gerber baby contest was rigged because they entered my picture in and I didn't win. But they just, their oldest child, they thought I was just pretty cool. And I had a really good and I think pretty typical Mormon childhood and upbringing. Um, I have two sisters and a brother, and I was just so excited to be baptized and confirmed a member of the church when I was 8. I was setting an example for my siblings, and we didn't have a ton of money, but my mom wanted to make the day special for me. So she took a dress she had worn to a homecoming dance at Rick's with my dad, and she repurposed it. She's a beautiful seamstress, and she refitted it for me so that I could have that as my baptism dress. And it had flowers on it and poofy sleeves. And I just thought it was so beautiful, and I felt so special wearing that. And just loved that she did that for me and made that day so special. So I just always wanted to do the right thing and make my parents proud. Growing up, I am a pretty high achieving, successful firstborn kind of personality. And I got good grades and kept the commandments. I was not perfect, but I I tried to be. And I saw the world through a pretty binary, pretty black and white lens. Um, Everything was pretty clear what you needed to do to be happy and what was good and bad and what was right and wrong and all of that. And pretty much everybody that I knew was a member of the church. My family and my extended family and my friends and my teachers and the policemen in town, like everybody was a member of the church. And so I could count on one hand the number of people I knew at my school who were not LDS or who didn't go to release time seminary, who just all did the same thing and thought the same thing. And we would pray before every event. We would pray before meals and morning and night personal prayers. And I played volleyball and basketball and softball. And my team would pray before every competition, every sporting event. And we even prayed in community events, public events, meals at the park. Everything started with a prayer. And so that was just kind of the community I grew up in. So I wanted to get married and have a family. And I don't know 100% whether that was because that was what I was supposed to do or whether I wanted that. And I think it was a little bit of both. I think a lot of truth in life lands somewhere in the middle. But I really wanted that. And so I was really excited when I finally turned 16. So I was able to date officially. And I had a lot of really good friends, a big group of friends. And we made sure that people dated and group dated so nobody got too serious and just had a lot of fun. And I had my first real boyfriend as I was a senior in high school and my first kiss. And he talked about love and marriage and what was going to happen after his mission. And I remember thinking that sounded pretty good. I thought that maybe I loved him too, but I wasn't sure because it didn't feel quite right. And I just thought, well, it's just because I'm so young and I just need more time. And how do you really know if it's the one? And I just need to go to college and figure this out because I don't know. I like him, but do I? It was very confusing. So he went on his mission and I went to Rick's College just like my parents. And I had a great experience there. I had good roommates and I dated and went out with a lot of different people. Never got serious with anyone. I had a really cool job on campus. I worked at the Development Alumni Relations Office, and that's for folks who donate to the college. So we did big events, and we'd have dinners, and high-ranking church leaders and apostles would come, and I would just be one of the students helping with that, or speaking at that, or sitting at the table talking to people, and just being the face of the college students and the rising generation. And so that was just great experience. When President Bednar was inaugurated, during the inauguration, President Hinckley came and I helped him with his graduation robe, so he was ready for that ceremony. And so I met the prophet, which is a really big deal at the time. And so I just loved all of that. But when I graduated from Rick's, I was still single, which was sad because most of my friends were getting married and having families, and that's what I wanted too. But I had not found my eternal companion, and had not worked out with my high school boyfriend. And Rick's was not yet a 4-year college; it was just about to turn into BYU Idaho. But I needed to go somewhere else to continue my education, so I transferred to ISU in Pocatello. And at in Pocatello, I was introduced to a diversity of thought that I really had not encountered before in my 2 decades of life, because there were people in my classes who weren't all LDS, and my professors weren't all LDS, and I had friends who weren't all LDS. So I was studying English classes, and I just remember learning, just reading literature and having conversations about philosophy and life and religion that were different than a lot of what I had grown up thinking and believing. And I enjoyed the diversity of thought. And I had my first friend and my roommate who was not LDS. And I just really enjoyed her company. She had a different perspective about the world, and she was also an English major. So we had a lot of the same classes. So we could talk about the things we were reading. And she's really challenged my thinking in a way that nobody had before. So I was continuing to date a lot of different people, and it was getting a little bit harder because I was getting older. I think I was in my early 20s. Oh my gosh, so old. But I don't know, not meeting anyone that I wanted to date seriously. And so it was just harder. And I remember the pressure was mounting, and everyone was asking how it was going and who I was dating. And I would go home after dates, and I would just be so happy to change my clothes and sit on the couch with my roommate and just talk to her about how it had gone. And I felt like I could be comfortable and I didn't have to worry about whether I looked good or sucked in my stomach enough, or I just felt very comfortable and like I could be myself. And so um, I was just always enough with her. So I gradually realized that I was spending more time with her than my other LDS friends, and that I was enjoying her company way better than other people, especially the dates I was going on. And I liked sitting close to her while we watched movies. I liked sharing my day with her. She would bring me lunch on campus, and I liked meeting up with her. And um, I just looked forward to seeing her. And I didn't have the words for exactly how I was feeling at the time. I think I just felt unsettled. And dating and marriage were always at the forefront of my mind. And so I was concerned about the way I was feeling and what it might mean. So I chose to handle that confusion by turning to what I'd been taught my whole life and seeking answers in church materials. So I looked up, threw myself into studying and praying and fasting more, and I looked up homosexuality in the Bible dictionary and in my EFY, my 90s EFY pamphlets and in my Book of Mormon Doctrine and in the Miracle of Forgiveness. And I read what it had to say. And everything that I read and heard told me that this was an affliction, same sex attraction. It was heinous, it was horrible. And people who made the choice to engage in same sex attraction activities were deviant, disgusting, and damned. I read words about being inherently evil, disgusting, perverted, broken, and bad. So, if this same sex attraction disease or affliction was truly what I was experiencing, I wanted no part of it. And I wondered why it was happening to me because I tried so hard my whole life to be good. Like, what had I done wrong? So I figured probably had something to do with the fact that this roommate of mine was not of my faith because I haven't really known that many people who were not. And this was probably what I had heard about my whole life when people talked about challenges of your faith that you need to overcome. So I thought this was a challenge of my faith and I better overcome it. So I tried to be even more righteous and I studied the scriptures more and I prayed more and I fasted. I would sign up to go to education week by myself. Lots of times people go as groups and they have fun, but I would go by myself and I would take my notebook and I would take notes on all the presentations. And I signed up to serve as an EFY counselor. And I took all of the music I was listening to and I replaced it with general conference talks. I would go to Deseret Book and buy the CDs when they came out, CDs. And then I would listen to them when I got ready or when I was in the car or when I'd go on runs. And I accepted a calling as Relief Society president. And I volunteered to serve at this Presbyterian soup kitchen in Pocatello so that on my weekends, once a month, I would fast the whole day. So when I went to the soup kitchen, I would be extra hungry. And then I could really understand what it felt like to be wanting. And then I would help serve people. And I just accepted every date that came along, but nothing was working. And I still enjoyed being with my roommate more than I enjoyed going on dates. And I still felt like I wasn't being cured of this same sex attraction affliction. I didn't go to the temple because no unclean thing can enter the house of the Lord. And I figured that was me. But um, I did try to not be unclean. um, I have learned since about a term called religious scrupulosity, and I didn't know that term at the time. But when I think back to what life should have been like as a young college age girl, it just was very different than I think that it should have or could have been like. And it just was what it was. So when I graduated from ISU, I took my first teaching job in the big city of Boise. And I knew that I would miss my roommate, but I also knew that I wanted to get away from whatever that weird thing was that I was feeling. So in Boise, I made an appointment with my single adult ward bishop, and I told him how I had felt and that I might have same sex attraction. And he reassured me that I could still marry a man and have a family if I kept the commandments and stayed close to Heavenly Father. So I thought, that's what I'll do. I trusted his advice and I threw myself into the church just like I had at ISU. And one of the things I was doing was attending Institute regularly. And I had a teacher that I really enjoyed. She was dynamic and she was spiritual, and I learned so much from her lessons. She was one of the only female full time church education instructors in the world at the time because she was still single. She could be full time CES. If she got married, she would lose that job and be expected to be home with her family. But at the time, I know of her and one other person that were full time female CES instructors. So she was older than me and she was single, but she had a really inspiring attitude and just like this zest for life. She did not see herself as lacking in any way or broken. She had a testimony of marriage and family that was so strong. She was not going to settle for just anyone. She was going to make sure it was the right person. And so I loved learning from her and I loved being around her. And I really looked up to her. She was someone I admired and wanted to emulate. She was 13 years older than me. I took her class a few times. And after the last class was over and she wasn't my teacher anymore, we became friends. She helped me get ready to go to the temple for my own endowment because I started to think, well, I hadn't served a mission because I didn't think I was worthy, but I started to think that things were going pretty good and I was feeling good. I felt like God was forgiving me and I didn't know what had happened at ISU or what I'd done wrong, but I was getting better. So we were friends and we liked going to the temple together and exercising and cooking healthy food and loved fall, collecting fall leaves, traveling and hiking. And we liked talking about life and about the church. And I just really admired her and I thought she was infallible. So our relationship progressed from teacher and student to friends and then to more when we shared a kiss in August of 2007. I hadn't kissed anyone since my high school boyfriend over a decade before, and I didn't know how to feel about it. But she was confused as well, but she said we need to make things right. So we called our bishop, and he came over to the house, and we confessed jointly, sitting side by side on her brown leather couch. It was August, so school was about to start, and she wasn't sure what to do. She'd not felt this way before. She called a trusted friend who was also in CES to ask for his advice. And he encouraged her to take a leave of absence and not start school and figure out what was going on. So she took his advice and I helped her pack up her office. Not long after that, she got another call. Her leave of absence turned into a forced resignation.
Oh,
Behind the scenes, people were talking about what had happened. And I know some of the players in the game, but I don't know exactly what was said or to whom. No one ever talked to me. But I can tell you the outcome. She's given a choice to resign or be terminated from her employment. So I know this is complicated because you may be thinking this was an apt consequence for her decision. She knew the code of conduct, just as any BYU student does when they sign up to attend. I know that too, but the consequence for one kiss seemed extreme to me. There was a young woman in her ward who was young and found herself pregnant before marriage. And I watched as she got engaged, and baby and wedding showers took place. And she worked through the repentance process, and people celebrated and loved her and helped her get ready for this new life that she was bringing into the world. And I felt like there was forgiveness and hope there, and there wasn't for me. What there was for me was a lost career, a lost reputation, a lost sole source of income, no conversation about what had happened, no questions, no support, no forgiveness, no hope. Um, it was just quiet, shameful conversations behind the scenes and devastating life consequences. And as collateral damage in the situation, I felt tremendously guilty. I felt an obligation to stay by her side and support her through this difficult time, both financially and emotionally. Depression was a way of life. It was very heavy, and I was full of fear and paranoia about who to trust. The loss of employment with CES reinforced the messages I'd read that I was bad, second to murder, a potential danger to others, especially youth. The next 8 years were a study in contradictions because we stayed friends and we were more than friends, but we were not more than friends. And I loved her, but I couldn't fully love her or even really accept that I loved her. We both stayed faithful and we went to church every week. And I served in the primary and in young women's presidencies. but it was really hard. There was always space between what could have. I'm sorry, let me catch my breath. There was always space between what could have been and what actually was. We traveled, we had adventures, we had a lot of fun, but it was always shrouded in this like head in the sand ignorance about what reality was. I didn't really date as much. I would go out sometimes, but I figured at this point no man would want to marry me now. And it felt a little like she was the only person I could trust in the world. She was my best friend. There was no way to fully exist within the doctrines of the church, but it was really difficult to see how to go on without it. And I remember wondering how it would end because I knew our relationship couldn't last and it couldn't be eternal. But I also didn't want to not have her in my life. And I felt like I needed her. Um, she was the only person who knew me. And I felt like she was the only person I could really trust. I felt really afraid to talk to anybody because I thought bad things would happen. So it all came to a pinnacle when she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in August of 2015. She made a decision to do treatment locally and she moved in with me. And I cared for her through surgery, multiple rounds of chemo, radiation, managing medications, food intake. Food intake's a lot, appointments, and I was working full time as an educator and finishing my educational specialist graduate degree. It was not an easy time. We were supported by a myriad of people, wonderful people in support. She blogged about her journey. She's an inspiration for family and friends and is an inspiration for family and friends. She had courage. She leaned into her faith even more. But behind the scenes, I felt pretty sad and I felt pretty lonely. People would say nice things about me, being an angel of a friend, but I knew they didn't really know the truth. And I just didn't know what I was going to do when this all ended. The person that I loved was gone. So she died uh, almost 10 years ago, next month, July of 2016. She was surrounded by her family, and it was less than an hour for her 50th birthday.
Wow.
So I'd wondered how it was going to end, but I never thought it would end like that. And the years that followed her death were pretty bleak. It would take me it would take me 3 more years of grieving and deconstructing before things started to change for me. I found friends, including our friend Laura, and I learned to ask, what if, instead of saying, I know, what if what I read about LGBTQ individuals in church literature wasn't actually true? For one thing, I knew it wasn't a choice I was making. It was part of how I was designed. So, if that's true, what if Heavenly Father loves me just as I am? And what if He doesn't want to change me because I'm not broken or disgusting or deviant? And what if I'm a really good teacher and I deserve to be around youth and I could inspire them? And what if I don't need to live a single, solitary life without a partner or a family, just waiting for death so I could have this affliction taken from me and be healed in the next life? What if that's not true? I really hadn't, like you said, heard terms like gay or lesbian used in a very positive way. In my experience, they were always negative and shameful. I remember being in Young Women's and the bishop was teaching a lesson on LGBTQ individuals, and some of the young women were making gagging sounds next to me. And I just thought, it's just so negative and so shameful. It was helpful to listen to podcasts like this one to start to counteract those negative messages I'd heard my whole life, um, and start working to see the world and my place in it differently. And it's difficult work, but it's really wonderful. It's freeing and it's empowering and it's full of light and life and love. And so today I've come out to family and friends and I've partnered with someone that I love very much. And I'm a stepmother. So I got to be a mother after all to two wonderful children, both of whom are going to be in middle school this year, both of whom are athletes and are amazing humans. And I am existing in a space that is full of mistakes and chaos and messiness, but also love and joy and peace and fulfillment. And things aren't just black and white anymore. It has all the colors of the rainbow, to be a little cliche. Everything I had been told about lazy learners leaving the boat, the empty chair at the table, the mists of darkness, no true joy outside the church, and more turned out to be wrong for me. And I couldn't be more happy or more grateful to discover what the truth is and to be where I am now. So, how you doing, Richard?
You are super brave, Jeanette. There's a lot of people who'd love to come through with their headphones and give you a big hug. You've summarized like 4 decades in 30 minutes. That's quite an accomplishment.
There's more in depth in the book, but thank you for recognizing how hard it is to put 4 decades into 30 minutes.
I,
Um, Go ahead.
well, I was just going to first say, I'm sorry your dear friend died in 2016. This wonderful woman that you're in love with, and have done everything to love and support her and with her during her year or so of ovarian cancer, and reading about that in the book this morning and how that spread and what a difficult disease and how you were there for her. But then it's like you can't fully grieve, like people don't recognize your true relationship with her. So you're in this private grief that maybe a therapist has a word for, where because no one knows how you really feel about her and she feels about you. You're 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 so sorry she's gone, but we don't grieve, we don't support you like we would, you know, a wife or a husband who's just lost their spouse. And so I thought of the double grief you're feeling of losing your friend, and then just our ability to not fully understand your level of grief and sort of walk with you on that road. But thank you for what you did for her and your love for her, and you are a true friend to her as you both were navigating impossible choices. I love how honest you were to go talk to the bishop, and then that opened the door that brought really difficult consequences that you frame up as pretty unfair, and I agree. And I'm just so sorry that all that happened to both of you, and the pain and the trauma and the shaming and how you navigated that, how you both didn't just die. I don't know how suicidal either of you got in those years, but we lose a lot of good people because they just feel the shame is just overwhelming and the lack of hope is so consuming. So thank you for that. You could talk more about that, or you can share more things that are on your mind.
I appreciate that you recognize that. I mention it in the book a little bit. There's, I think suicide can seem like the right choice because it seems like, well, take if you take the notion that you're going to be fixed in the next life, and I heard, and it could be Mormon rumor, that the kingdoms of glory, not even the celestial kingdom, are so majestic and so beautiful that you would have given the chance to see them, you would kill yourself to get there. I don't know if you've heard that. Um, but if that's true, and it's so beautiful and so glorious, and you're going to be with family and you're going to be fixed, then why would you not want to leave this life and start the next one sooner. So I think that's a dangerous way to think. And if you look at LGBTQ just as being a challenge of mortality that we don't fully understand and God's going to make it right someday, I mean that is a way to put it on your shelf, but it's dangerous rhetoric for people, if that makes sense.
It does. And we've talked about Elder Oaks and Elder Wickman were the last time, I think it was Elder Wickman for sure, that said, we're all straight in the next life. And the church hasn't said that since Elder Wickman. They haven't untaught that, but I think it's possible the church has recognized that for suicidal gay and lesbian people, they think, just like your point, that's my final ace in the hole to be straight. I've done everything to be straight in this life. I will die by suicide and I'll be straight in the next life. And I hope that's the reason we haven't said that. Maybe local leaders have still said that because we don't unteach things. Sometimes you don't stand up in church and say, this is what we used to teach about LGBTQ people. We don't teach that anymore. This is actually what the church teaches. And we do say we're not sure about the next life in a lot of ways, but we've never come out and said, we just don't understand sexual orientation in the next life, so we're just going to let us all figure that out in the next life. Greg Prince has been on this podcast, listeners, and he's been really helpful for me to kind of go to frame up the church in the late 60s when they first talked about this space to where they are now. And he talked about the behavior model, and now we're mostly to the biological model. But you grew up and came out in a time during the behavior model.
Correct.
And and the pain and the trauma and the shaming. And as I read your book this morning, and I encourage listeners to read the book, you have all these journal entries in your book. And if you want to know someone's heart, read their journal entries. These are beautiful journal entries, Jeanette, of a remarkable, courageous, faithful woman that's trying to do everything to figure out her life and is absolutely committed to the gospel of Jesus Christ and of following our leaders and then just trying to figure out your sexual orientation. I love you recognize religious scrupulosity, but I love you use some of these affliction, heinous, and just this feeling that, the bottom of this iceberg for you is I'm a broken human being. And so I think that leads into the hyper-religiosity because you're just doing everything you can because the assumption, rightly so, because everything you hear about people like you is negative. I am a broken human being.
And it's the core of the biology versus the biology debate, whether if you are making a choice, then that's something that is a part of your agency. But if it's biological and the words that I told you, pedophile, deviant, broken, if those are true, then that is what you are biologically. So it's not it's a good way to think about yourself because then that creates that scrupulosity to try to change it and try to be better, which is common in a lot of stories that I'm hearing now. Even David Archuleta's latest book, you throw yourself into being just the most righteous that you can be, and it's a hard place to be.
It's a hard place to be, and I love these letters to your younger self. Part of your framing your book is you write to your younger self, and I think that's super powerful. So this is an awesome book. Just to remind, the best statement I can find, listeners, that the church has ever said about really being in the biological model. Imagine if you heard this as a teenager, an early 20-year-old. The church does not teach that someone has same-sex attraction can change or eliminate that attraction. The church has stated a change in attraction should not be expected or demanded as an outcome by parents or leaders. End quote. That's Elder Holland that said that in a church talk. It's on the church's website. That's the best statement to talk about the biology model, and just that I, as a leader, as a parent, and especially you, Ben Chilati used to say, a gay Latter-day Saint, he said, I thought the atonement would make me straight, but what it did is it healed my broken heart. So I just mourn for your earlier years, and it's remarkable that you are the woman you are and living the life you are and have worked through all that really difficult stuff. minute mark 29 is golden. For those of you that heard Jeanette talk about going from I know to what if, and then you listed all those what if things, that was just beautiful. And
Thank you.
that was full of faith and courage. And to me, it's part of what I invite everybody to do, and what our church does is write your own story. You have to author your own story. You have to write your own story. And in the case of LGBTQ people, just I'm going to walk with you and leave all the judging to our Savior and his perfect understanding. But I've also reflected that our teachings kind of grew out of the behavior model era. And I wonder if they fully caught up with the biological model. Greg Prince talked about when the church said it's not a choice and you can't unchoose it, the other shoe hasn't dropped. And so listeners, I'm supportive church leader and church doctrine, but I'm also super supportive that things may change as we get further light and understanding to support wonderful people like Jeanette, who this is just who she is. And I love the way she owns it and realizes God created her as intended. I don't think anybody should look in the mirror and think they're a mistake, straight or not straight. Everybody needs, and I don't think that changes church doctrine or church policy. It just puts us all on the same moral footing, that none of us are broken. None of us are a mistake. None of us, God turns his head sideways when we look at him or pray to him. He loves all of us. We have heavenly parents that love all of us. And I just mourn that you didn't feel that for all these decades and walked in such a difficult, painful road. You're a remarkably courageous woman. And then you found your partner and these two middle school age kids. And I'm going to read just a little bit from the very end of your book for our listeners. I'm so proud of my new little family and the life we're building together. And you name the kids, and I'll let people read the book to hear the names. These kids are phenomenal, talented, flawed, loving, beautiful children, and I feel honored to be part of their lives. Lindsay is a wonderful partner. She's patient, loving, kind, funny, beautiful, and willing to learn about me as a partner with me when times are rough. I've never felt happier or more complete. Realizing the present moments is all you have. Make now the primary focus of your life. It's not uncommon for people to spend their whole life waiting to start living. And you're quoting an author. I love that. We can learn from the past, but let it go. That time is over. We can also live responsibly and plan for the future, but we can't wait to live. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed to anyone. You are a gifted writer, Jeanette. I just love that. So,
Thank you.
more things you'd like to share with our listeners that come to your mind?
Sure, that notion is an Eckhart Tolle notion, the power of now. And I learned a lot through a book club that I found after I started to be a little more authentic. And I think that seeing someone you love pass away early in their life gives you a sense of carpe diem, seize the day, but also just recognizing that I'm not living for tomorrow, that I have right now, and I want to be a good person now, and I'm not going to berate myself for being who I am right now, thinking that someday it's going to change. Um, I think that something I've learned is suffering is not saintly. I thought that suffering was the same as repentance sometimes, I think, and the more I could do it, I could save Jesus the pain. I know eventually he's going to have to take it all, but the more I could take on myself, the more it would take it off his plate. It's very not logical, but it felt sanctifying, and I wanted to be saintly and sanctified. And I think suffering is not the same as those two words, or it doesn't make you sanctified to suffer. Um, I think it was on your podcast, but I like the Mormon notion of the fortunate fall, that Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, Eve especially was given a choice, and she chose to transgress the commandment of God to not partake of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because she saw a greater good. She was going to be able to, she'd be exiled from the Garden of Eden, but she'd have chance to live fully and to have a family and to have greater light and knowledge and to grow and to become more than being like an innocent child. And I see that in my life, and that I make the choice to not live a life alone. And now I'm having all of these experiences that are making me a better person. When you're a parent, and you learn a lot about yourself and about others and about being less selfless, or about being more selfless. And I'm so happy to have those experiences and to have that opportunity, and I'm a better person for it. And yeah, so I'm glad for that. Um, I am really happy to be reclaiming my personal power. I can trust myself and I can trust my decisions, and I don't need anyone else to tell me I'm worthy or valuable. And I can control my own destiny, and I really like that. And I own my mistakes, and I know I'm not perfect, but I also get to own when I make good choices too, and not just feel bad all the time. um, and I have a deep love for my family and my ancestors, and I love my mom and dad and my brothers and sisters. And I always wanted to be true. And I, for a while, looked at my ancestors, my namesakes, and I thought of all their sacrifices to come to Zion so we could have the fullness of the gospel. And I thought I was a disappointment. And I can look at it differently now. And you may disagree with me, but I think that it's really hard to tell your story sometimes, especially when it's raw and vulnerable and emotional. Sorry, but I know I'm being true now, and in the same way they were, to what I know is right. And I hope that by talking about it, it helps people. I am an English nerd, and I always think of Emily Dickinson, and she said, if I can stop one heart from breaking, or ease one life the aching, or cool one person the pain, then I shall not live in vain. And I really feel that, and I hope that. Um, I'm proud of my book. I hope that it helps people. Um, I know that it hasn't been well received by everybody, but it reads chronologically, and you get to see through my journal entries over time a peek into the psychology of somebody as they grow through the faith, and um, as they grow up. And then it's interspersed with letters from my current perspective to what I would say to my past self. And I think that gives it a little bit of hope, because there was some dark times that I'm happy to be through now. So I guess those things. I'm just happy to be where I am now. I hope that you can sense the hopefulness that is the end of the story, and recognize that along the way there's a lot of learning to be done. And I hope we can hear one another's stories with love and compassion, even if we don't fully understand them, but recognize that we're coming from a place of where we are at the time. And when we have greater light knowledge, we act differently. And this is what happened to me, and hopefully talking about it and sharing it can help others. Does that make sense?
Does.
Okay.
Just super thoughtful, super emotionally, intellectually, spiritually mature. Um, just and just you've walked this road so alone for so long, and I'm just inspired by your story. I wrote down a couple things, listeners. I wrote down the word proximate as Jeanette was talking. What would it like for Jeanette to see LGBTQ people in the church, in different levels of the church? The church has said you can you can be LGBTQ and hold a temper recommend. Yeah, you've got to be keeping the law of chastity, and Ben Shalati is one of the best examples of that. Who holds a temper recommend, celibate, gay, LDS. But I just wonder, I just wish for a day that there were just proximity. So your younger self growing up in Idaho, everybody around you was aware of LGBTQ people in the church, serving in the church. And that would have been so much healthier for you. And the people then talking to you about your sexual orientation would have had better proximity to people walking this road versus just this veiled threat of all the words that you heard. So, you know, I just hope for better days. Um, I sort of think of things that could change without changing doctrine to improve your younger self's life, and that would be one. There's so many things we could do without changing doctrine just to improve your experience as a younger Latter-day Saint. And then I'm open to doctrinal changes that help you feel like you have a full seat at the table if your best path is to be with your future wife. And I'm not out campaigning for doctrinal changes. I'm just feel there's so much pain in this space. I'm open to doctrinal changes because I think everybody should have the same experience in mortality and the chance to share their life in a monogamous relationship. I think sometimes we boil being gay or lesbian just down to sexual activity. And I think that dismisses the beauty of relationships. My wife and I, obviously, that's part of our experience and still is, but all these other ways we connect now that we've been married 35. We've both gone through rotator cuff surgery, so we have the privilege of dressing each other for the first time and being completely dependent on somebody and coaching each other to take our medication and figure out I turned 65, I'm signing up for Medicare. And there's so many ways that this companionship blesses my life. And I'm so grateful to have a companion for emotional connection, intellectual connection, just to wake up in the morning and start my day. She's just answering the door right now to a worker, probably an Amazon delivery person or somebody. And she knows I'm in a podcast and can't do that. But I just think that I just love healthy, beautiful relationships and recognize that can happen in straight relationships and same sex relationships because you're the fruit of that. By their fruits, you shall know them. You are the happiest, best Jeanette Griggs you've ever been. I'm from what you've written and what I'm seeing firsthand in your story.
It's true. And I agree with you. It's Ether 12:4, is that right? It was one of my favorite scriptures, that whosoever believeth in God might with a surety hope for a better world. And I have those same hopes as you. And I think the work that you're doing here and allowing people a space to share their experiences so we can learn from one another is so important. And thank you for that.
The other word I wrote down here, thank you for that, Jeanette, is the word thank you for you, for all you've done for the church, all the classes you've taught, being an EFY counselor, the tithing you've paid, all the work you did in the church to bless the lives of others. And I've tried to do that more on podcasts to thank people that aren't fully participating in the church for all the years they did fully participate in the church and not make them the hero one day and the villain the next day. You're the same Jeanette Griggs that's walking. Some my guests have called it a double bind, where you love the church and would love to fully participate in the church. You love to spend your life with somebody, and you've obviously felt that in this very beautiful, healthy relationship with this wonderful woman that passed away, and are having it again with Lindsay. So it's just you're walking a road, obviously, that straight Latter-day Saints don't walk. This double bind, and I just thank you for what you did in the church and mourn with you for the loss of community and the loss to have a place to teach and talk and add value. And that can be really complicated to lose a community to some extent because you're being your best self and trying to do really difficult things. There's just these trade-offs that you face that straight Latter-day Saints don't face.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to share in closing?
I don't think so. I kept thinking of a line from a poem by E. Cummings, and it just starts, I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. And he's talking about loving someone and even when they're not around, you have them with you. And I feel like my book is my heart. You can carry it with you in your hand or in your pocket or on your nightstand. But hopefully it's a message of of hope and inspiration at the end of the day and something that will help somebody out there. Um, and that's just it. That's just my intent with this and with the book is to be someone that can help others because of what I've experienced. So that would be the last thing I have to say. And thank you for the opportunity to share today.
You did great. I love this heart of yours. It's just your whole career is focusing on help others. This is just who you are, Jeanette. Thank you for writing this book out of love to help others and give the younger version of yourself more hope. And listeners, the name of the book is Be True from, and I can't say these words very well, from Orthodoxy to Authenticity. The journey wasn't straight. I kind of like that.
That's a little tongue in cheek.
That was pretty well done, Jeanette, by Jeanette M. Griggs. So check out the show notes for her book. And I'm just grateful that our friend Laura Root, tremendous mentor to me, incredibly thoughtful woman, living her best life. And when I see the two of them together, just my heart, I just smile and like their social media posts and say they're a great couple and just try to love everybody in the path that they feel is best for them and leave any judgment to the Savior and his perfect understanding. But you're awesome, Jeanette. So this is Richard Ostler and Jeanette Griggs signing off from another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love.